Welcome to episode 4 of the Ayaba podcast with your host, Kenneth, and my co-host, Kerry. And today we have a special guest, the founder of Ayaba Lifestyle, Gbemi. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Kenneth.
How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been all right. Exciting as usual. Always lots to do. It's been a fun week this week. I'll probably go into it later, but there's been lots of, significant things happening in the Ayaba world.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So, as the founder, it would be great for, our listeners to hear from your perspective, what inspired you to start this project?
Right. First of all, thank you for inviting me on the show today. It's one thing looking at you from the background and cheering you on and seeing what you're doing and just lending my support. It's another thing to actually be in front of a camera, recording and actually getting to speak. And I'm quite pleased to be here. So what inspired me to start Ayaba? It started completely different from what it has transformed to today, as you both know. When I started this, it was more of, it's always been something I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to go about it, even though it was a different objective at the time. What I wanted was a platform where there could be a community of people looking to live a sustainable, healthier lifestyle. And when I say that, it's not about weight loss or weight gain or all those, aesthetics that people think lifestyle is all about. For me, it was building a community of people who wanted to live a holistic kind of sustainable lifestyle, looking at the physical, the mental, the emotional, and having like a safe place where you can come and chat and exchange views and add value to each other's lives. However, when we started that, what propelled me to start it after having all those years of ideas was the pandemic, the lockdown, everyone, in their own space and getting depressed, and lots of people died, and it affected us in so many negative ways. I think that was what kind of gave me the kick up the backside to say, look, it's time to actually birth this idea. And that's why I just said, okay, I'm going to start Ayaba, and it would be about building that community support, really.
Yes.
But when we started, I do quite a bit of networking, meet a lot of people, and then it's important to not just integrate in the community, but also connect. So whilst connecting and speaking to business owners and speaking to people who live, residents, conducting opinion polls, some results came out from that. It's all good that you're doing what you're doing, but that's not necessarily what we need, What we need is someone or, an organization or a group of people to help in this regard. And that was talking about social issues and how it impacts minorities. I was going to say ethnic minorities, but I held off from the word ethnic, just minorities.
I understand.
Because we can be minorities in different ways. We can be minority, women in business is, kind of minority, marginalized, underrepresented. Disabled people, marginalized, underrepresented. Black people, marginalized, underrepresented. Homeless people. There's so many demographics of people.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, this is huge. Probably more than I expected, but something had to be done. So I sat with Carrie.
Yes.
And we drew a plan of how we're going to change the whole aims and objectives of Ayaba with the support of, some friends and well-wishers as well. And that was basically how we got to where we are today. So basically what Ayaba is, I'm proud to say, is a vehicle to educate people on social injustices, how they can challenge it or challenge them, how they can seek support, give them a voice to speak out, give them the confidence to encourage them, in ways to maybe identify, because sometimes we go through experiences and we think that we're the only ones experiencing those. For example, passive aggressiveness or institutional racism. We think, is it me? Or am I misinterpreting this? Maybe they don't really, but when someone is educated on the things that happening in society today,
Yes.
then they realize, oh, I'm not alone. This is a thing. You know, and that's what Ayaba is for. And I'm so pleased. We've got a long way to go,
Yes.
but I'm so pleased that we are where we are at now. So yes, that was how the idea of Ayaba, and that was how it was born, and that's how we made a transformation from where we were before to where we are now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting
Great.
that the whole idea of living a holistic, sustainable lifestyle. When we talk about what Ayaba used to be, it's almost as though where we're at right now is more so expansive than before.
Yes.
Right. Not only looking internally at what we can do to improve our own health, physical, mental, spiritual, and all that, but then also wider issues like societal issues, as you said, that can also have an impact on people. And I think focusing too much on the internal can sort of create like over individualized solutions sometimes, because it just neglects the fact that there are bigger forces that may be holding us down at the same time. And I think, just in line with that, I'd also say that without the proper education or framework to take that and actually challenge these issues in a meaningful way, it may have the adverse effects.
Absolutely.
If you just think that, the world is against me, there's nothing I can do about it. But opening up, building communities, I think, is a way to just come together, recognize our own shared struggles, trials and tribulations, as well as obviously just like being there for each other and formulating a way to actually move towards a society where we are no longer minorities. I don't really want to be a minority, but it is just the case in the UK being a black person, right? So
Yes.
Yeah.
and of course, those who are facing multiple intersections of inequality, whether it's racism, right, and like ableism or other kinds of things, sexism too, misogyny.
Yeah.
If people, let's say for example, if you're like a black woman, for example, you have to deal with being black, then also being a woman. If you're disabled, then of course, if you're black and disabled, then you're gonna have those two things intersecting on you as well. So, and in line with that, refugees as well.
Yes.
People that are escaping very harsh conditions, trying to find a better life, which is obviously the topic of conversation today.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yeah. So I do quite a bit of volunteering as part of this mission of mine.
Yes.
To basically, and I say this a lot when I speak to people, my orientation has always been adding value wherever you are, be it at work, be it at home, be it in an organization, be it in the community. So part of that has spurred me to volunteer for a number of organizations, one of which is the Refugee Council. So I volunteer for the Refugee Council's resettlement team within our local borough. And I work with refugees that are resettled here in the UK. So I have first-hand experience of what they've been through, what they're going through. So when I take that and also listen to what people say on the radio, for example. So I'm an avid LBC radio listener. It's always on, 24/7. Because I think that they speak the undiluted truth, really. And you hear when people call in and make all these voice out their ignorance. Yes. That's all I can call it. You wonder, oh my God, in this day and age, are people still this ignorant? Are we still this entitled? Do we feel that this is really the case? I'll give you an example. So there's a family that's resettled, and the man in the home was a medical doctor.
Yes.
A well-to-do medical doctor, with his kids and wife, doing well, thriving in practice. But of course, with what happened in his country, they've had to come to the UK and be resettled. And he's now having to struggle to not just learn English, resettle, get his papers, access to, before he gets a job, access to benefits, is it housing benefit, is whatever benefit. He doesn't want benefits. He's a proud man who's been able to provide for his family for years.
And has spent years studying to get to that point as well.
Studying to qualify as a medical doctor. It takes, in every country in the world, it takes years to study and become a medical doctor. And not just become that, he's got years of practice. He's got an established practice. Nobody wants to give that up.
Right.
I wouldn't want to go to another country where I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put food on the table. And then some ignorant people pick up the phone and say, oh, they've come to take our benefits, they've come to take our jobs. They haven't come to do anything. What they've come to do is actually add value to this country.
Yes.
Because if you look at the NHS, for example, I don't know what the statistics are, but you walk into the surgery, you walk into the hospital, most of the staff are ethnic minority.
Yes.
If they were all to wake up today and go back to their countries, the NHS is going to crumble immediately. We don't have the human capacity to run it ourselves. So we need to wake up and smell the coffee, and realize that refugees are not a burden on this country. They actually add a lot, they add to the economy of the country. They help it thrive. I'll give you another example. So the resettlement team, they have a Ukrainian women's group.
Okay.
So I was recently invited to come and give a talk to the women, and I was, we're having the initial chat about what they wanted me to speak about. Believe it or not, the women want someone to come and speak to them about starting their own business. They're not speaking about accessing benefits. They want to work. They don't want to sit at home doing nothing. That's their pride. To be able to provide for themselves, to put food on the table for the kids, to put clothes on their backs, to have a roof over their heads. They don't have the benefits culture that we have here. They're used to working hard for what they have.
Right.
So we need to do our research properly. We need to find out people's history, people's backgrounds before we're quick to judge, and in the first, most of these countries, the West has, a hand in what's happening there anyway, but that's a
whole different topic.
It's a topic for another day, but
in line with that too, there's also the idea of just generally just being as empathetic and compassionate as we can to our fellow human beings across the planet who are dealing with war-torn situations. See how people respond to Ukrainians are trying, native indigenous Ukrainians are trying to flee war-torn situations, and how the entire planet is mobilized to try to figure out how to resettle them in safe ways, to find the safe routes to come into countries that are not dealing with that currently, right? Versus how people from other places outside of Europe mainly are being dealt with as well. And just, in my opinion, of course, refugees and people that are coming from elsewhere, even if it's just migrants that are not really escaping war, for example, in addition to just adding value, I think it's also just a matter of being like, all right, we're going to help you out if you need help as well. If you're escaping that war situation, here's a safe place that you can come to while you figure out what's going on, figuring out your next moves. So there's that aspect too. I think the way that a lot of those kinds of people that you mentioned from the LBC, from the more reactionary side that call in and give rather ignorant takes about people coming in from elsewhere, trying to take jobs, trying to dilute what it means to be British, all these kinds of things that are being perpetuated within
misconceptions.
Misconceptions are just perpetuated on and on and on. And I think that having these kinds of conversations would also just provide a way for people to understand that these are people at the end of the day, right?
Right, but I mean, they're easily used as a scapegoat for a lot of their economic problems. I think you briefly touched on, I do agree that we definitely got to tread lightly with this, but I do believe that it's important for these individuals to sort of educate themselves a little bit with regards to the reasons why we have this particular refugee crisis. It's, the conflict that's taken place in places like the Middle East that, the West, particularly the UK government, have played a small role in, the sort of power vacuum that... Right. And the power vacuum that was left in Africa, which led to a lot of the rise of corrupt leaders. Yeah, there's a whole host of things that led to it. But I think it comes down to the fact that, when someone's in a corner and they're left with their issues, where to look then to people that, don't look like themselves.
Yeah. I always say there's only one race, the human race. Until we get that, we're always going to be stuck in a rut. Until we understand that black, white, Asian, whatever race you are, we all bleed red blood. So for you as a human being not to understand that another human is going through a crisis in the country and they need a safe haven, then there's a problem.
Right.
Because if anything were to happen in the UK today, we would want to go somewhere where we feel safe. So how would you feel if you were turned around and said, no, you can't, you can't come here, you don't speak our language, you don't look like us, And most of these countries would open their arms to welcome any UK citizen coming into the country. So now we're in a position to help, we have the resources to help. Well, we are doing a little bit, but it's just a tiny drop in the ocean, you know. And that's, I'm not sure we want to go into, the Rwanda situation yet, but that might be a good segue to go into, what's happening. We've paid 120 million, and I've been calling it the cargo, to cargo people to Rwanda.
A legal form of human trafficking, maybe.
Exactly. To deter human traffickers. But you just hit the nail on the head. A legal form of human trafficking. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Who thinks about these policies? Who thinks about these ideas? It's almost as if we've lost touch with reality.
Right. And we only have like one example in human history, or I wouldn't say human history, but recorded history anyways, with regards to this particular scheme, which was, Israel between 2014 and 2017, where they sent about 14 refugees to Rwanda. And was clearly unsuccessful because all 4,000 ended up having to trek their way up across Africa and back into Europe to then make their way into the UK. So it's
we have leaders that react rather than prevent. We have policymakers that probably don't even know the history, because I don't understand how you can want to repeat the same thing again, decades later and expect a different result. Again, I think, why Rwanda? Why? Why not Hertfordshire or Oxfordshire or somewhere else, create a village there if you're trying to deter human traffickers. Right. Even though I don't see how this deters human traffickers anyway. But I just think the whole reasoning behind it, then we have to go to considering, not being bound by the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. So where are we going? Where is this leading to? There's so many aspects of it, and I feel that we wouldn't cover all of it in this particular episode, but there's a lot left to be desired. There's a lot, a lot that needs to be addressed.
So the whole idea of this scheme being pushed to deter smugglers from bringing people over doesn't really seem to line up in my eyes, considering, as I was saying before, right, you'd want to focus on those traffickers and not punish the people that are trying to escape those situations. And I don't really see how this policy is going to actually deter people from coming anyways. If they're escaping the situations, even if, for example, they know that there's a chance that they'd be resettled somewhere else, they're going to try their luck anyways. Why not? If they're going to get deported anyways, why not just try their luck anyways? I haven't really seen any evidence that this is actually going to be successful in deterring people from coming, or going to the place where they feel like they have at least a chance of being safe. Especially if you're talking about someone who has kids, someone who has siblings and stuff like that.
In my opinion, that deterrent is a smokescreen. How do you deter them? By taking the asylum seekers and dumping them somewhere. The traffickers are going to get another lot of people and bring them back, and it's going to continue happening. We've got resources in this country to find the traffickers. Maybe not all of them. You know what I mean? You kind of break, their hold on how they get in here. Again, I've said it before. We're more of a reactionary people. rather than preventive. We don't prevent. We don't look to the root cause.
Yes.
We'll wait for things to happen, then start scrambling around, changing policies, making policies to, almost plaster, put a band-aid on the problem.
Right.
As opposed to find the root cause and deal with it from the root, But we patching things is what we do.
Yes.
This is another patch. For me, I've listened to the justification of it, and it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make sense to me. And there's so many questions. We just disregarded right after right, and we've disregarded their. These people are. There's the Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, the right to life, the right to live, and right to protect individuals' lives. So when they've left home, they've come to the UK to seek a better life, and then you put them against their wishes, no time frame, no time scale, no time to prepare, nothing, and then you're taking them to another country where they know no one. I don't get it. They're humans, they're not baggage. They're
and also as late as, and this is one thing that I still can't really figure out, as late as last year, the UK were trying to call out Rwanda for their human rights records. And so, regardless of whether one thinks that those human rights records, if those claims are legitimate or not, the UK government themselves, people in there were saying, "Oh no, Rwanda, there's issues here with their human rights record."
Yes.
A year later, they want to send all these people there. So. And that question, whenever that question is brought up and asked, is always a deflection, really. And it's so strange. It's like, okay, so were you lying back then, or do you think that their human rights record has changed? Like, what is their justification for why they're choosing
Rwanda?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if we look at the UK government statistics about the refugees that have crossed the channel, if we look at 2020, only 8,404 people successfully cross the channel, but the subsequent year, 2021, over 20,000 more people, leaving it at 28,526 people. And between January and March in 2022, there's already been 4,850 people. So I think it's that sort of sudden increase by 20,000 that inspired the government to ignore their previous statements with regards to Rwanda's human rights records and have settled with the idea that maybe we should follow suit with what Israel did.
But also following suit with what had been proposed a couple of years ago as well. This is not the first time that this kind of deportation scheme had been proposed. In 2020, I believe it was, Priti Patel kind of proposed that, or at least tried to suggest that it may be a good idea to send asylum seekers to an island in the South Atlantic, a couple islands in the South Atlantic as well, which had been met with people saying that this is not the greatest idea, it would cost too much, and it's inhumane and stuff. And of course, now is another opportunity to bring up such a scheme, which is, I would say, in terms of the government at the moment, they're saying that they are not deterred by this recent plane cancellation with the first people that were supposed to be deported to Rwanda, which took place on the 14th, right? Highly anticipated day as to when the first people were going to be deported for the scheme. That number a couple of weeks ago was, in the hundreds in terms of who will actually be on this flight. And what we found is that up until a few days ago, that number had dwindled down to fewer than 10. That flight, the flight was still scheduled to go off. But as on the day, right, it was on the day of the flight that they had one final person, or there was one person who, due to legal rulings, was not allowed to be on that flight, and because of that, the entire flight had been cancelled. And of course, the people, the government right now are still saying, "Oh yeah, we're still going full steam ahead. We're still trying to figure out how to make this work," because they are convinced that this is the best way to deal with the number of refugees that are coming into the country. So,
but isn't there a court ruling that flight can't go?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
So
the
it got
European-
cancelled because of that late ruling on that day. But apparently they're gonna keep trying to.
Yeah, they're gonna keep trying,
to make
and
it
that's
happen.
what they're trying to do at the moment is try and get the UK not to be bound by the ECHR and to be bound by our own. But we don't even have a robust enough human rights, article that something to replace the ECHR. We don't have anything that's robust enough. We don't even have anything at all.
I think the attempt is to sort of rewrite
exactly
human rights in general.
I think one of the government ministers was saying this morning about they will keep trying until until they achieve their aim. So I think it's a bit about achieving their aim, not actually looking at what's good for the people. And when I say the people, not just the people that they're trying to, force to leave, but the people here. I would argue that if you had able-bodied people who are willing to work in a society, why not let them do the work and contribute to the economy? Everything has a knock-on effect. Look at London, for example. Every piece of green space is being used to build multi-level homes.
Yes.
That are like matchboxes. If we're willing to keep doing that, then let's house them here and make them, give them a home, give them jobs, let them contribute to the economy. Maybe Britain's economy is going to be a little bit better while we struggle with the aftermath of Brexit. It's like everything is intertwined, and not for good reasons either.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to what people were saying in regards to the cost of this flight. Had it gone off, they were saying something like 500k for like 60k per head in terms of rough numbers in terms of how much it will cost to send to send a specific one.
And that's just for the flight.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And like, even though the government or like the Boris Johnson spokesperson didn't kind of deflected away from that specific number and pivoted towards talking about how much it's costing the UK right now to house asylum seekers. And I think that number is 1.5 billion a year, I think it was, which is roughly 5 million a day.
Right, so we're talking about house and how much it's costing to house, but these are not permanent measures. For example, again, I go back to the settlement team. They support them for between a year to 3 years. So they want to actively get into jobs, actively start living. They want to be integrated into society. So it's not a long-term thing. They make it sound as if it's going to be an ongoing thing. No, it's not. It's actually a lot more economically, efficient to have them stay than to spend 120 million on one flight. How many flights are we planning to send to Rwanda? Once a month. So we spend 120 million every month to get people out of here. People who, by the way, will find their way back.
Yes.
It's just being penny wise and pound foolish. Go to the root cause. That's it for me. Let's pack the statistics aside for just a moment and think about, history. Let's go back to what happened all those many decades ago. It's almost as if, so these are countries that the British have, raped and pillaged and, disrupted the government, disrupted the land, disrupted the people, sold a culture that's not their own to. And they've been struggling ever since to grow because the British still have an impact on their daily living till today. So they're unable to grow. We call them third world countries. We call them all sorts of names. But that's because of the pillaging from the British. And now it's like a vicious cycle that's come back to bite them in the behind. With all these people now, the governments can't grow, the economies can't grow, they don't have, for whatever reasons. I don't want to make them sound like, but people now want to come to England as a result of what England has done to these people. So it's just a vicious cycle.
It is.
But then fast forward till today, we're still making the same mistakes again. Again, we're being reactionary and not dealing with the root cause. But there's so many questions to be asked with the steps that the government is taking. So many questions to be asked.
And before we go a bit more into like the specifics of this Rwanda scheme, I do want to go back to what you were saying in terms of, you know, it is the case that the UK is doing something in regards to refugees and stuff, but the difference is in regards to what people would class as legal routes versus illegal routes. And of course, if you're living somewhere where there is no legal route or legal safe route to come, then what other option do you really have?
Exactly.
And so that just kind of adds to it in terms of people being punished for not having any other option to come here safely.
Being born like under a particular nationality that in turn makes it difficult for you to get a visa to travel to any place, you know, any sort of quote unquote first world state. It's quite difficult for someone from Syria to go to America on even for a holiday.
Even for a holiday.
And like, we've also seen a big difference in terms of course, how different refugees are treated. Different asylum seekers are treated based on where they're from. As I was saying before, you have people, let's say, for example, native Ukrainians who, of course, need help escaping and finding safety elsewhere, like in the UK, for example. And, you know, there's been a lot of measures to ensure that those people actually get housed, people actually, people that are willing to sponsor them and to bring them into their homes, and which is good. But my ideal situation would be for that to be applied to everyone, really.
Right.
Or the very least to have that same level of urgency to deal with the problem in the same way that people mobilize so quickly to get a few million Ukrainians out of the country safely and elsewhere into the West as well.
It's good help, but even that scheme wasn't thought out properly. You know, it was a quick fix. You know, let's help these people. You know, they look like us. Let's help them. They're Europeans. Let's help them. You know, and just to, you know, kind of answer what you're saying, yes, there's history. It's evident. If the crisis were to be happening in an African country, the West will never rise up the way we've done for Ukrainians. I'm not saying it's wrong. You know, it's laudable. It's good what what the West is doing. It's good what we're doing as a people. You know, but yes, there's a little bit of a difference on how we treat different people in different crisis areas and regions and the refugees that come out of those regions.
Even the way that's being covered as well in the media. You've seen a few people let their masks slip a little bit where they're like, no, it's not like the Middle East. These people don't have blonde. These people here in Ukraine have blonde hair and blue eyes. They're civilized. And it's like, oh, you know. And I've seen that rhetoric being displayed multiple places, even if they haven't said those words exactly. You know,
It just goes back again to ignorance. I think that's the fundamental thing, ignorance. And that's why Ayaba does what it's doing, you know, to educate people. Because they're actually people who are ignorant, not because they want to, but because they haven't been taught otherwise. You know, children live what they learn. You're born into a society, into a home, and what you meet there is how you act and do and believe. You know, the many times when you get to school in secondary school, you realize, oh my God, that's different. They do things differently. I thought all homes do this particular thing. You kind of feel like everybody does what you do in your home. You believe that everybody believes what you believe in your home. So if people have been conditioned or brought up in a certain way, there comes a stage in our lives where we have to unlearn all those bad things. You know, keep an open mind, meet people, speak to people, you know, see where they're coming from, what their story is. I'm just going to digress a little bit and talk about, you know, doctors and you know, ethnic minority doctors and the ignorance involved in patients in the UK. Oh, I don't want to be treated by that black doctor. And at the end of the day, he might even be more qualified and more capable, you know, of treating you than the doctor that you want to be treated by. You know, so there's so much ignorance because, they're coming from a third world. They wouldn't know how to treat me. Hello, they probably will treat you better. You know, they probably will be able to diagnose you faster or quicker. And bearing in mind that some of these doctors trained in countries where they don't have the equipment we have here. So having that kind of training and then coming to a part of the world where there's equipment, marry the equipment with the talent, it's a win-win situation. I would want that kind of person to treat me straight away, you know. I don't even look at colour when I'm being treated. I'm looking at, I'm listening to what you have to say. What should be the ideal thing? What are you saying to me? You know, does it make sense? Does it align with what I think is wrong with me? What is the quality of care and service I'm getting? Not that I want to be treated by a particular kind of coloured doctor or a non-coloured doctor.
Exactly, right,
you know? So it's the ignorance in so many ways. And it's this ignorance that we see pan out in education. Hence the racism in education. Hence
Yes.
the microaggressions in schools and institutions.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's this same ignorance.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying I think you're spot on with regards to hospitals and the way, particularly, doctors are treated by patients. But if we think about the other way and how particular doctors struggle with diagnosing certain cases among ethnic minorities, such as something like jaundice, which is the yellowing of the eyes, which is something that's particularly difficult for I would say a Western sort of Caucasian. Doctor to identify in a black child.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, these children end up developing serious liver problems, long-term liver problems throughout their lives as a result to misdiagnosis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's a curriculum issue, maybe I would say. Education.
So medical books everywhere are the same. They treat you for jaundice.
Yeah,
They treat you for
yes.
they're well, I wouldn't say the same, but they're quite very similar. So these are all medical conditions. But because some medical conditions are prevalent within a particular demographic of people, because we think that we are not that people, so we don't need to put resources towards learning how to fight that particular, for example, jaundice, or polio. Polio is something that we probably don't have in the West anymore, but people in Africa still have it.
Yes.
So you probably wouldn't find a Western doctor talk about polio. Sickle cell is something that we don't really battle here with because we found a way of dealing with it. But in countries in Africa, it's still very common.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of research in it.
Right.
In the Western world. So that again is it. The research, and then it's ignorance. If we look at ourselves as a people, okay, so human race, we may not be where they are, but let's dedicate resources towards this. Dedicate resources towards making sure that we kind of eradicate because they're not. They're treatable, they're not terminal things. If they're ailments or diseases or whatever that are treatable, maybe by even nutrition, educating on nutrition, not necessarily even medication. But it's the ignorant. There's a lot to be said. We can go into different aspects, and it's not just the ignorance; it's the inability to want to be taught. Because even if you don't know something, and someone says to you, "Oh, it's not actually this way, this is how it's done," or in my culture, my people, we should listen. It's their culture, their people, we should learn. Again, volunteering can be a very beautiful thing because you get exposed to so many things, there's certain things that I personally, wouldn't do or wouldn't think that was wrong or right. But I learn about other people's culture.
Yes.
For example, in some I could say, that dude might hand gesture to you and it's all right. In some cultures, it's bad. You can't do it. It's like, what do you call it?
Like a form of disrespect. Maybe. Right,
You can't do that. Or sit in front of someone and put your feet up. Your back on your, so many things. So it's just, you learn. And for me, I find the learning exciting. Because I'm adding to my portfolio of knowledge. Okay, so if I were to ever find myself in this region, or if I were to ever have a close friend of that ethnicity or whatever, I then know how to speak to them and how to act in front of them.
Yes.
So why can't we all just be adaptable? Why? And we can be. We just choose not to be.
Yeah.
Again, back to the microaggressions. Oh, this is how we've always done it.
I think it's also just deeply rooted in a kind of like chauvinism, like Western chauvinism, in the sense that there's this tendency to think that the way we do things here in the West is better than the way that you do things over there elsewhere, and that we should have the authority in terms of how these things should be conducted. And of course, you see that played out in terms of when sort of certain recommendations or suggestions are made elsewhere, and not factoring in the cultures of the people there, the religions and all that, their ways of life and ways of being. And kind of like elaborating on what you said before in regards to healthcare and racism in the healthcare industry as well. Like, it's not only the case that certain conditions that may be affecting certain people more than others may be taken more seriously, but it's also seems to be the case that even when you're talking about the same thing, the way it may express itself in different people is different. And so they're
Yeah.
not necessarily taught to
Yeah.
recognize it in,
Yeah.
for example, like a condition that's affecting a black person versus
Yeah.
that same condition that's affecting a white person.
Yeah.
And you can imagine the material that's being given out when it's being taught. If that entire curriculum or that entire module, whatever, doesn't take into consideration different people's bodies,
Yes.
right? The way different people are,
Yeah.
their skin color, like certain other things, right? You're not really gonna notice those things as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the ideal scenario is that we live in a world where if we don't know things, we're able to learn from each other, share ideas, share knowledge, share cultures in a sort of appreciative way, not in an appropriative way, if that makes sense as well. And yeah, I mean, that can also be spread, also sort of shape the way that we deal with people that come from other places if they need help, right?
Yeah.
If you think that the people coming from a certain place, which are just like less worthy than others, are less human than others, then you're not going to want to share the same level of hospitality as you would as you would, for example, with this situation here. And you're actually seeing that backfire as well to some degree, whereby you have so many people, so many Ukrainians finding homes, finding sponsors, but then you're also seeing growing concerns about those people also ending up on the streets because the people that are housing them, their sponsors, had not really appreciated the enormity of actually taking on a whole person, adult that has their own personality, their own culture, their own ways of being, and they overlook all of that just because they share the same skin color. They think, because they share the same skin color as us, the same hair color as us, that those things are not going to be an issue.
Again, it's a little bit of also superiority complex.
Yeah.
Yes, we share the same skin color, same hairs, but they're coming to us. We're British after all. They're coming from whatever region they're coming from, so they will play to our tunes and obey our rules, and we can then impose on them our culture, our way of living. It's not going to work. They're humans at the end of the day. They're humans. They're probably adult. Even children have minds of their own. You have a culture you want to do, and yes, you're right when you said that, because the whole program itself was doomed from the beginning.
Yes.
Because you can't marry two people who don't know each other, from different cultural backgrounds, different languages, different everything, and think, we're in crisis. Okay, do you want 350 quid? We'll put them in your home. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
First of all, the money's not even enough in today's world with all the, inflation and rising in costs and everything.
Yes.
And everyone's irritable at the moment. Everyone's almost penny pinching. And then there's this thing of, even if you were my brother and you came to my home, I have to change things around for you. As much as I love my brother, at some point I just want my me space.
Yeah.
And then you have a total stranger, from another culture. It's a huge burden. It wasn't thought out properly, and maybe we're going to put the names on because we're looking at the money aspect of things and not looking at the intricacies and, the possible pitfalls of the whole program.
Yes.
And there's a lot. There's a lot. We've heard stories of all sorts of things happening. They're not enough. They're not adequate checks, adequate background checks. How are they, pairing these families? How are they, they do say that they're, but is it actually happening in reality?
Right. I think it's clear, as you were saying, it's sort of reactionary, isn't it, this response?
It's always reactionary.
there isn't really a plan or an idea on how this is going to last long term.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My mum would have thought that, these things would have been ironed out before, before getting to this escalated situation in the first place. And so
I think it's almost as if someone comes, okay, let's do this so we can get an accolade. And it doesn't matter how long it lasts for, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, people will say we've done something. We don't think about the repercussions of this. So what's going to happen after we get that award or that trophy for being the people that have just thought this out? What then happens afterwards? What happens to the people? What happens to not just the people coming in, but the people the indigenous people? What happens to them? We're forgetting all those things. We're not thinking it through.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how bad it's going to have to become before we start being proactive. we've talked about,
Right.
refugees and race and everything. I just want to talk, David, a little bit yet again.
Sure.
About this reactionary thing.
Yes.
Gang, knife crime is one of the things, a huge thing, problem in society.
Yes.
That again, government is reactionary about. We haven't heard a lot about it now because we're tackling, the refugee, the crisis, deporting people,
Right.
Focus. We can't do things simultaneously. We can't do things and maintain it long term. Be consistent. Do things consistently and put the right people, the capable people in charge. You bring someone who's very flippant to come and be cabinet minister of this that can't really do what they're supposed to be doing, and you expect that portfolio to. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. There's a lot left to be said to, that's got, knife crime, gangs,
Yes.
So many issues that we're reactionary about, let's put them in jail, let's put them in prison, let's do stop searches, let's do this. Everything that would infringe on the people's rights and nothing that would actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to, a minority of people. Again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think getting to your point, like getting to the root of the problem in all of these things, I'm seeing a common thread, which is just the same system. And so I feel like there's a reluctancy to actually get to the root cause because it may actually just undermine like the entire system as a whole. Like as we were alluding to before, right? If it is the case that certain people benefit from other people being disenfranchised and marginalized further. If they're currently, even for example, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, they're still sitting comfortable, right? If they don't really have, if they're safe, right? There may not be a reluctancy to even give up what they have in favor of redistributing it to those who need it. And so I feel like unless there is a big change in terms of who actually holds the power, right? People that are more progressive, more people that are more interested in helping working class people, for example. I feel like that would be like the only it would be at the very least like better than a system whereby the people that hold the most power would favor those who still have the most, as opposed to people that have the least. I think because it's at the root of a lot of issues, right? You're talking about gang violence, knife crimes, and stuff. The reason why you get a lot of those issues is because you have poverty. Why do you have a lot of poverty in these areas is because of like historical racism, as well as things that are happening right now and continue to happen. Like the stop and searches are continuing to affect us and these kind of things, right? So,
and if we have like parliament members where their only interest is being re-elected or coming up with policies that allow the public to feel as if some decent things are being done, so therefore we should, elect them for the next 5 years. I think that's their only goal. I don't think they're thinking about, for example, if we lived under a dictatorship where the dictator's concerned about the next 30 to 40 years of his life, then I think the policies would be a bit different. I'm not advocating for a dictatorship. However, I do find that with this particular sort of government system we have at the moment, that sort of lacks a bit of direct democracy in the form of like referendums to get a good understanding of what the general public wants. I think we're stuck with these short-term policies.
I think it's time for us to start self-regulating. I think it's time for us as a people to start looking out for ourselves. Again, it goes back to the education. We talk about people being educated against racism, understanding what, we should also educate ourselves on the detrimental effects of certain actions on our community. You talked about poverty. Poverty is rife within a certain demographic of people.
Yes.
But why is that? How can we empower ourselves to get out of, if we're stuck in a rut, to get out of that rut? And that's one of the things that I hope that we achieve with Ayaba, that education.
Yes.
And I've always been quite passionate about working with young people, so use this as a vehicle to reach out to young people. There's so many things. Oh my God, I've spoken to so many young people. They're so talented, the talent. But there's no encouragement because of course we have to depend on our government. Our government is there for the people, right?
Yes.
But if the government is not really doing what they should be doing, when they should be doing it, I think we should find other social vehicles of trying to get people who want to change turn their lives around to do
Right.
it, you know. In sectors like this, you know, we start, you know, a step at a time from our local community, you know, partner with people that have the same vision and just take this nationwide. Because if we continue to wait for central government to do something,
Yes. Waiting for opportunities can always lead to dead ends.
Right. Yeah. I guess, you know, the best case scenario is that we build community, build the sort of sufficient sort of political, economic education as to why these things happen to us, like sharing that knowledge, and then also moving towards, and in doing so, of course, building up our own power as a people, right? So that we can actually challenge certain policies in meaningful ways, as opposed to, you know, voicing our concerns, obviously expressing that to the world, but not having any real avenue to actually change that, and to constantly see that even though something that most people may want in a particular region, you know, let's say we're voicing our concerns about it, you may see a poll that's like, oh, over 50% in this region wants this, but yet you just don't see that playing out. You don't see the policy change, you don't see the laws change, and that creates a lot of distrust in the political system, in the economic system as well. And people want alternatives. They want to live in a society that doesn't have so many of these like contradictions, so many of these crises that seem to pop up again and again. Yet another refugee crisis, yet another financial crisis, yet another cost of living crisis. And these things are going to get progressively worse unless like these real changes are being made, which is like super unfortunate.
I think we should work on, you know, representation in policy making, you know, because when you have people making policies and rules and laws that don't understand and never walked in the shoes of people they're making these policy rules and laws for, they'll never make the right ones. So we should, as a people, work, and when I say as a people, the minority people, the marginalized people, work towards being represented in government, in power, so that our voices will be heard, and so that policies will be enacted to actually fit with what's happening in society today. You know, you can imagine a government minister saying, "Oh, people need to go and buy value brands if they, you know, they can't afford stuff." People are already buying value brands and still can't afford stuff. But if they were in touch with reality, they would know this, you know, and they wouldn't be as flippant as that, speaking about people's everyday experiences. So we need to work towards educating ourselves, to bringing ourselves to a place where our voices are heard by having representation in government.
Yes. And of course having the external base to actually support those people as well. Like, you know, I think generally speaking, you know, what we want, or like I would say what I want, I don't know if you two will agree, is at the very least parties that represents the people, like in a genuine way. And so that you just don't get this apathy that's just like, oh, there's no point to even participate at all. I think for the most part, like as we were alluding to before, we at this point are getting to the point where like we need to just prioritize self-reliance, autonomy, our own personal autonomy as well, coming together as a community, figuring out how to deal with, for example, cost of living crisis, and giving people, developing programs and schemes and things that would help us alleviate this crisis. Like, for example, with food, for instance, you're seeing food prices rising everywhere. And that's like the basis of being alive, pretty much. We need food to sustain ourselves. We need clean water. We need food, preferably healthy food, right? And so, you know, what a solution could look like if the government continues to not solve this problem, which is not our fault to begin with. It may require solutions like farming for ourselves, creating more, and of course in urban settings, more sort of hydroponic farms, indoor farming, stuff like that, to be food sovereign in and of ourselves, so that like that thing of being hungry is not held over our heads, type of thing. And those are like real solutions that we can actually work on today. You know, let's say we learn it, and then we bring together people to actually learn it. But look, you know, we can go to this shop, get this, and go here, get this, and then build like something where you can grow stuff inside your own house. And as a community, let's say one person grows one thing, other person grows another thing. You know, sharing those resources around, you know, things like that. Obviously, ideal scenario is that the entire system is will benefit the people.
Yeah.
But
That was a system that was used in Africa back before, the colonial masters came and disrupted the whole thing. You'd have one thing, this person would have another thing on their farm. No one was hungry. And if you didn't have something, you kind of barter.
right.
So,
Trade.
trade, you barter. Everybody lived sustainably. But, anyway. So, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And we've been incredibly happy to have you on for our 4th episode.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure joining you guys. I'm happy for the invitation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I look forward to being invited yet again.
Of course.
And I'll be cheering you on from the sideline as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. And we definitely hope that you will enjoy this episode on the refugee situation. Not only in regards to Rwanda and UK, but also just widely refugee crises that are going on elsewhere, as well as a bunch of other issues that we got into as well. These are ever evolving conversations, and of course, going down the line, there's always other opportunities to revisit and to develop our ideas further, and to even bring on more guests to express their thoughts as well in the same way that you have. So definitely appreciate you coming on. It was a fun one.
Thank you. A fun one, a serious one, but there's a lot to be said. But yes, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, cool. And we'll see you all in the next one. Feel free to like and share, to give us your thoughts. Give us some comments in the description as well, in the comment section and all that. So we'll see you in the next one.
We out.
Bye. See you.